I am Brianna, 32 years old, and for 10 years I was the invisible engine keeping my family's logistics empire from crashing and burning. My father Winston believed that a woman's place was in the background while his son stood in the spotlight. I accepted the late nights, the missed holidays, and the disrespect because I thought loyalty mattered more than money. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I found a payroll document left in the printer that changed everything. My incompetent brothers were making triple my salary while I did all their work. When I confronted my father, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "They are men, Brianna. They have families to support. You are just single." He thought I would cry. He thought I would go back to my desk and work harder to earn his approval. Instead, I burned his empire to the ground without lighting a single match. Before I tell you how I took his biggest clients and left him with nothing but his pride, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the person doing all the work while someone else took all the credit. The nightmare began at 2 in the morning in the middle of a brutal Chicago blizzard. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, buzzing with the specific ringtone I assigned to my father Winston. It was a sound that instantly spiked my cortisol levels. I fumbled for the device, my eyes burning from only having closed them 3 hours prior. Before I could even say hello, Winston's voice roared through the speaker. "Brianna, where is the shipment? The senator is going to have my head on a platter if that vintage wine is not at the venue by noon." I sat up shivering as the cold air of my studio apartment hit my skin. "Dad, I organized that logistics chain 3 days ago. Jamal is the account manager. He was supposed to sign the release forms at the port yesterday afternoon. He did not sign them," Winston shouted. "The container is locked in customs hold. The port authority says they have not seen Jamal in 2 days. Fix it, Brianna. Fix it now or do not bother coming in tomorrow." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Jamal was my older brother, the vice president of sales. He was 35 years old, and he had never closed a deal without my help. I dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Nothing. I dragged myself out of bed and looked out the window. The snow was coming down in sheets, burying the streets of Chicago in white silence. I put on my boots, my heavy coat, and wrapped a scarf around my face. My car, a 5-year-old sedan that I was still making payments on, groaned as I started the engine. The drive to the port usually took 30 minutes. In this weather, it took an hour of white-knuckle sliding on black ice. When I arrived at the customs office, the port authority officer looked at me with pity. He knew me. He knew I was the only one in the Winston global family who actually knew how to fill out a bill of lading. "Ms. Winston," he said, shaking his head, "your brother never submitted the bond payment. The system locked the container automatically at midnight. I pulled out my personal credit card. It was the card I was saving for a down payment on a condo. Put it on this," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. "I will authorize the expedited release fee too. Just get the truck moving. It cost me $5,000 of my own money to fix Jamal's mistake." I stood on the freezing dock watching the forklift move the crates of wine into the temperature-controlled van. The wind whipped my face, stinging my eyes, but I did not go back to my car until the driver pulled away. By the time I drove back to the city, the sun was rising over Lake Michigan, casting a cold gray light on the skyline. I walked into the Winston Global headquarters at 6 in the morning. My boots left wet, slushy footprints on the carpet. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew and one person stumbling out of the executive elevator. It was Jamal. He was wearing the same suit he had on yesterday, but now it was rumpled and stained. He smelled like expensive tequila and stale perfume. He saw me and blinked, his eyes bloodshot. "Oh, hey, Bree," he mumbled, leaning against the wall for support. "Why are you here so early? You look like a drowned rat." I stared at him. "I just came from the port, Jamal. The senator's wine was held up because you forgot the bond payment. I paid for it." Jamal laughed, a low, dismissive sound. "Oh, that. Yeah, I meant to do that, but Tiffany wanted to go to that new club opening." "Do not be so dramatic, Bree. You fixed it right. That is what you do. You are the fixer." He pushed past me, heading toward the break room for coffee. He did not say thank you. He did not offer to reimburse me. He just assumed that I would clean up his mess because that was my role. I was the janitor of their mistakes. I walked to my office, which was actually just a large cubicle in the hallway outside my father's suite. I needed to print the incident report for the insurance file. I sent the document to the central printer and walked over to the copy room. The machine was whirring rhythmically, spitting out warm sheets of paper. I picked up the stack expecting to see my report. Instead, I saw rows of numbers. It was the master payroll ledger. The new HR director must have sent it to the wrong printer queue. I knew I should not look. I knew I should shred it and walk away. But the devil was on my shoulder and he was whispering, "Look at what you are worth to them." I flipped the page. I found my name. Brianna Winston, Director of Operations, $85,000 a year. It was a decent salary for some, but for the amount of work I did, it was robbery. Then I looked up. Jamal Winston, Vice President of Sales, $250,000 base salary, plus a $50,000 guaranteed bonus. My breath hitched. Jamal did not know how to open a PDF file without calling IT support. I looked down the list. Trey Winston. My younger brother, the Director of Marketing, $180,000, plus a company vehicle allowance for his Porsche Cayenne. Trey spent his days posting selfies on Instagram and calling it brand awareness. And then I saw the line that made my knees buckle. Tiffany Winston, Consultant. Tiffany was Jamal's wife. She was a white woman from a wealthy suburb who had never set foot in this office for a work-related reason in her life. Her salary was listed as $60,000 a year. My father was paying my sister-in-law nearly my entire salary just to exist. I did not scream, I did not tear the paper. A cold calm washed over me. It was the kind of calm you feel right before a car crash, when you realize there is nothing you can do to stop the impact. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I looked at the family photo on my desk taken 5 years ago. We were all smiling. I was in the back, partially obscured by Jamal's shoulder. It was a perfect metaphor. I picked up the payroll ledger and walked to my father's office. The door was open. Winston was sitting behind his mahogany desk, polishing his golf putter. He looked up as I entered, his face arranging itself into a mask of annoyance. "Did the wine get delivered?" he asked, not even saying hello. "Yes," I said. I placed the ledger on his desk right on top of his putting green. "But we need to talk about this." Winston looked at the paper. He did not flinch. He did not look embarrassed. He looked bored. "You were not supposed to see that, Brianna," he said, his voice flat. "But since you have snooped, let us not make a scene. What is your problem?" "My problem is that I am the Director of Operations," I said. "I run the logistics. I manage the warehouse. I handle the crisis calls at 2 in the morning. And you are paying Jamal 3 times what you pay me. You are paying Trey double. You are even paying Tiffany $60,000 and she does not even work here." Winston sighed, putting his putter down. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Brianna, you have to understand how the world works. Jamal is a man. He has a wife. He has a family to support. He has a mortgage in a nice neighborhood. He needs that money to maintain his standing as a provider." "And Trey?" I asked. "He is single. He lives in a loft downtown." "Trey is building a future," Winston said. "He needs to project success to attract the right kind of partner. The car, the clothes, it is all part of the image. And you, Brianna, look at you. You are a single woman. You have no children. You have a small apartment. Your expenses are low. What would you even do with $200,000? Buy more shoes. Do not be greedy, daughter. Greed is a sin." I felt like he had slapped me. It was not just the money, it was the absolute lack of respect. He did not see me as an adult. He did not see me as a professional. He saw me as a placeholder. "And Tiffany?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Why is she on the payroll?" Winston smiled, a patronizing tilt of his lips. "Tiffany is the face of our social standing. She organizes the charity galas. She brings in the high society clients just by being who she is. She needs that money to maintain her appearance. Her hair, her skin, her wardrobe, it is an investment in the company brand. You work in the back, Brianna. You are good at the gritty work. No one needs to look at the mechanic to appreciate the car. He picked up his putter again, signaling the conversation was over. Now if you are done complaining, get back to work. We have the logistics for the Mayor's Summit next week, and I want you to start the routing. I stood there for a moment watching him practice his swing. He really thought this was fine. He really thought I would accept this. I reached up and unclipped my security badge from my blazer. I took the heavy ring of keys, the keys to the warehouse, the keys to the server room, the keys to the safe out of my pocket. I placed them gently on the payroll ledger. I am not greedy, Dad, I said softly. I am just finished. Winston froze mid-swing. What does that mean? It means I quit. Before Winston could respond, the door behind me swung open. Jamal and Trey walked in laughing loudly. They were holding coffees from the expensive cafe down the street. Trey was wearing a new designer hoodie that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. Oh, look who is engaging in some family bonding, Trey sneered, seeing me standing by the desk. Did Dad finally tell you that your quarterly report was boring because I fell asleep reading the first page? Jamal chuckled, slouching into one of the guest chairs. He did not look at me. He looked at the putter in Winston's hand. Nice form, Dad. Are we still on for the club at 3? I need to blow off some steam after that stress with the wine this morning. Stress. I turned to look at Jamal. The stress of sleeping while your sister fixed your mess in a blizzard. Jamal rolled his eyes. Here we go again. The martyr act. You love playing the victim, Brianna. It is the only way you get attention. Trey stepped forward, looking at the keys on the desk. Wait, are those the master keys? What is going on? She is throwing a tantrum, Winston said, his voice dripping with disdain. She saw the payroll list, and now she thinks she deserves CEO money for doing secretary work. Trey laughed, a sharp barking sound. You want Jamal's salary? Are you kidding me? Brianna, you are an operations girl. You move boxes. Jamal closes deals. There is a difference. And what do you do? Trey, I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Besides crashing the company Porsche and charging bottle service to the corporate card. Trey's face flushed. I build the brand. I create the culture. You wouldn't understand because you have zero vision. You are just bitter because you are 32 and alone while Tiffany and Ashley are living their best lives. Maybe if you smiled more and worked less, you would find a husband to pay your bills instead of begging Dad for a handout. That was it. The final tether snapped. They did not just undervalue me. They despised me. They resented my competence because it highlighted their uselessness. I looked at the 3 men in the room. My father, my brothers. They were supposed to be my protectors. Instead, they were my parasites. I picked up my purse. You are right, Trey, I said. I do not have vision. I only have the passwords to the inventory system, the contact list for every major supplier, and the personal cell phone numbers of our top 20 clients. But I am sure you brand builders can figure out how to route a fleet of 50 trucks by this afternoon. I turned to Winston. Good luck with the Mayor's Summit, Dad. I hear the unions are threatening to strike if the contract is not renewed by Friday. The paperwork is on my desk, or at least it was until I shredded it this morning. Winston dropped the putter. It clattered loudly on the floor. You did not. I did not shred the official copies. I smiled. Just my personal notes. The ones that explain how to actually run this company. You said Jamal is the pillar of this family. Let him hold up the roof. I walked out of the office. I walked down the hallway past the cubicle where I had spent 10 years of my life. I did not pack a box. I did not say goodbye to the staff. I just walked to the elevator. Behind me I heard Winston shouting, Brianna, get back here. Do not walk away from me. You walk out that door and you are dead to this company. Who is going to hire you? You are nothing without the Winston name. I pressed the down button. The doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the sight of my father's red, angry face, I whispered to the empty car, "I am not nothing, Dad. I am the competition." I walked out of the building into the cold Chicago air. The snow had stopped, but the wind was cutting through the streets like a knife. I did not feel the cold. I felt a fire burning in my chest. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I had done it. I had actually done it. I looked at the clock. It was 9:15 in the morning. At 9:30 my phone rang. It was Winston. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:32 it rang again. It was the warehouse manager calling my personal line. "Ms. Winston. The drivers are asking for the route manifest for the afternoon deliveries. The system is asking for an administrator password. I cannot override it." I took a deep breath. "I am sorry, Mike," I said. "I do not work there anymore. You will have to ask Jamal." "Jamal." Mike laughed nervously. "Jamal does not know a route manifest from a lunch menu. Ms. Winston, we have perishable goods on the dock. If they do not move in an hour, we lose the contract with Whole Foods. That sounds like a management problem, Mike." I hung up. At 9:45, my phone buzzed with a text from Trey. "Stop playing games. What is the password for the server?" I deleted the text. Then I opened my settings. I scrolled to the contact for Winston Global. I pressed block caller. I did the same for Jamal Trey and even the landline for the office. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a bridge burning. I started the car and pulled away from the curb. I did not know where I was going, but I knew where I was not going. I was not going back to be their doormat. I drove to a small coffee shop 3 blocks away. I ordered a black coffee and opened my laptop. I had no job. I had minimal savings because my salary had barely covered my rent and student loans. But I had something they did not. I had the knowledge. I opened a blank document. At the top of the page, I typed 2 words: Onyx Logistics. It was a name I had thought of years ago, a name for a dream I never thought I would pursue. Onyx. Black, strong, and unbreakable. I started typing. I listed every major client Winston Global had. I listed their contract expiration dates. I listed their pain points, the things they complained about that Winston refused to fix. I listed the suppliers who were tired of late payments from Jamal. By noon, I had a business plan. By 1 o'clock, I had drafted an email. It was simple, professional, and devastating. To whom it may concern. Please be advised that effective immediately, I have resigned from my position as Director of Operations at Winston Global. It has been a pleasure serving you. For any immediate concerns regarding your current shipments, please contact Jamal Winston directly at his office line. Best regards, Brianna Winston. I did not ask them to follow me. I did not badmouth my father. I simply gave them the contact information for the man I knew would fail them. I attached a small file to the email for my top 5 clients. It was a guide titled Transition Protocols. It looked helpful, but inside it contained technical jargon and logistics codes that I knew Jamal and Trey could not decipher. It was a map written in a language they did not speak. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered. "Is this Brianna?" The voice was sharp, panicked. It was the logistics coordinator for the Senator S. office. "Yes, this is she. We just tried calling Jamal. He said he does not know where the second truck is. He said you handled all the GPS tracking. We have 300 guests arriving in 4 hours, Brianna. We need that truck." I leaned back in my chair. "I understand your frustration, Sarah, but as I mentioned, I no longer have access to the system. Did Jamal check the physical logs in the dispatch office?" "Physical logs?" Sarah sounded like she was about to scream. "He said he does not know where the dispatch office is." I took a sip of my coffee. "I am sorry, Sarah. I wish I could help. but I am sure the vice president of sales can figure it out. He is very highly paid for his expertise. I hung up. I watched the snow fall outside the window. The city was moving fast, but for the first time in 10 years I was sitting still. And across town, in a corner office with a mahogany desk, I knew the panic was just beginning to set in. They wanted to be the kings of the castle. Now they had to rule the ruins. I walked straight into my father's office without knocking. The payroll ledger was clutched in my hand so tightly that the paper was beginning to wrinkle. Winston was sitting behind his desk, meticulously cleaning his golf clubs. He had a white towel draped over his shoulder and a focused expression as he polished the head of a driver. He didn't look up when I entered. He just kept rubbing the metal as if it were the most important thing in the world. "Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We need to talk about this." I placed the ledger on the desk directly in front of him, covering his view of the club. He stopped polishing. He sighed, a long, weary sound that suggested I was interrupting something crucial. "What is it now, Brianna?" he asked, looking at the paper with disdain. "I told you I am busy. I have a tea time at 1 with the mayor." "You are paying Jamal $250,000, I said. "You are paying Trey $180,000. I make $85,000, Dad. Explain to me how that makes sense." Winston picked up the ledger. He glanced at it briefly, then tossed it aside like it was junk mail. "Brianna, do not start this again. We have discussed this." "No, we haven't," I countered. "We have never discussed why the vice president of sales, who hasn't closed a deal in 6 months, makes triple the salary of the director of operations who runs the entire company. We have never discussed why Trey gets a Porsche allowance for posting on Instagram, and we definitely haven't discussed why Tiffany gets $60,000 a year for existing." Winston leaned back in his leather chair. He crossed his arms over his chest and looked at me with an expression that was part pity, part annoyance. "You are looking at this all wrong," he said. "You are looking at numbers. I am looking at life. Jamal is a man, Brianna. He is 35 years old. He has a wife. He has children. He is the head of his household. He has responsibilities that you simply do not have. He needs that money to provide for his family, to maintain his status in the community. That is what men do. They provide. And me," I asked, my voice rising, "what am I?" "You are a single woman," Winston said, shrugging. "You have no husband. You have no children. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Your overhead is low. What do you need $200,000 for? To buy more shoes? To go on vacations? Do not be greedy, Brianna. It is unbecoming. You should be grateful you have a job that pays you well enough to live comfortably. Many women would kill for your salary." "Grateful," I repeated, feeling a cold fury settle in my chest. "I should be grateful that you pay me 1/3 of what you pay Jamal to do his job for him. I should be grateful that I stay here until 9 p.m. every night while he leaves at 4 to go to happy hour." "Jamal has to network," Winston said dismissively. "That is part of his job. And as for Trey, he is building a future. He needs to attract a wife. He needs to project success. The car, the clothes, it is an investment in his potential. You, Brianna, you are established. You are fine. You do not need to impress anyone." "And Tiffany?" I asked. "Why does she need $60,000? She doesn't even work here, Dad." "Tiffany is the face of this family's social standing." Winston snapped, his patience finally wearing thin. "She organizes the charity galas. She hosts the dinners. She keeps up appearances. That costs money, Brianna. Her hair, her clothes, her gym membership, it all reflects on us. You work in the warehouse. No one sees you. You do not need a wardrobe budget. You do not need to shine. You just need to work." He stood up and grabbed his golf bag. "Now, if you are done counting other people's money, I have a game to get to. The mayor does not like to be kept waiting. And Brianna, try to have a better attitude. Bitterness causes wrinkles." He walked past me whistling a low tune, leaving me standing there with the ledger and the realization that to him I wasn't a daughter, I was just overhead. The office door swung open before I could even process my father's dismissal. Jamal and Trey strolled in like they owned the building. Jamal was holding a venti latte and checking his watch while Trey was busy adjusting the collar of his designer jacket. They brought a wave of expensive cologne and entitlement into the room that instantly suffocated me. They stopped when they saw the tension in the room. They saw me standing there with my hands clenched, and they saw our father holding his golf club with an annoyed expression. "Oh, look who is engaging in some family bonding," Trey sneered, seeing me standing by the desk. "Did Dad finally tell you that your quarterly report was boring because I fell asleep reading the first page?" He laughed at his own joke, expecting the room to join in. Jamal chuckled, slouching into one of the guest chairs. He did not look at me. He looked at the putter in Winston's hand. "Nice form, Dad. Are we still on for the club at 3? I need to blow off some steam after that stress with the wine this morning." Stress. I turned to look at Jamal, my voice vibrating with disbelief. The stress of sleeping while your sister fixed your mess in a blizzard. The stress of almost losing a $500,000 shipment because you were too busy partying. Jamal rolled his eyes. "Here we go again. The martyr act. You love playing the victim, Brianna. It is the only way you get attention. Just because you drove a few miles in the snow does not make you a hero." Trey stepped forward, looking at the payroll ledger that was still sitting on the desk. He saw where my finger had crumpled the page near his salary line. "Wait, what is going on? Is she complaining about money again?" "She is throwing a tantrum," Winston said, his voice dripping with disdain. "She saw the payroll list, and now she thinks she deserves CEO money for doing secretary work. She thinks she should be paid the same as the men in this family." Trey laughed, a sharp barking sound that grated on my nerves. "You want Jamal's salary? Are you kidding me? Brianna, you are an operations girl. You move boxes. Jamal closes deals. There is a difference." "And what do you do, Trey?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Besides crashing the company Porsche and charging bottle service to the corporate card, what exactly is your contribution to this bottom line?" Trey's face flushed a deep, angry red. "I build the brand. I create the culture. You wouldn't understand because you have zero vision. You are just jealous, aren't you? You are jealous that Tiffany and Ashley have husbands who know how to make real money so they can enjoy their lives. You are bitter because you are 32 and alone. Maybe if you smiled more and complained less, you would find a husband to pay your bills instead of begging Dad for a handout. You are single because you are miserable, Brianna, so do not take your self-hatred out on our bank accounts." That was it. The final tether snapped. They did not just undervalue me, they despised me. They resented my competence because it highlighted their uselessness. I looked at the 3 men in the room. My father, my brothers. They were supposed to be my protectors. Instead, they were my parasites. I reached up and unclipped my security badge from my blazer. I took the heavy ring of keys, the keys to the warehouse, the keys to the server room, the keys to the safe out of my pocket. I placed them gently on the payroll ledger. "You are right, Trey," I said, my voice ice cold. "I do not have vision. I only have the passwords to the inventory system, the contact list for every major supplier, and the personal cell phone numbers of our top 20 clients. But I am sure you brand builders can figure out how to route a fleet of 50 trucks by this afternoon." I turned to Winston. "Good luck with the Mayor's Summit, Dad. I hear the unions are threatening to strike if the contract is not renewed by Friday. The paperwork is on my desk, or at least it was until I shredded it this morning. You said Jamal is the pillar of this family. Let him hold up the roof." I walked out of the office, leaving the keys on the desk and the silence heavy in the air. I walked out of the building and the wind hit me like a physical blow. It was 10 degrees below zero in Chicago, but for the first time in years I did not feel the cold. I felt the heat of a bridge burning behind me. I walked to my car, my boots crunching on the gray slush. I did not look back at the glass tower where I had wasted my 20s building someone else's legacy. I got into my sedan and threw my purse on the passenger seat. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. It was done. I was unemployed. I was broke. And I was free. I drove toward the highway, my mind racing. I expected fear. I expected panic. But all I felt was a strange, hollow silence. It was the silence of a phone not ringing with a crisis. It was the silence of not having to solve a problem I did not create. I merged onto the expressway heading north. I needed coffee. I needed a plan. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a siren. The dashboard display flashed Dad. I stared at it. My heart hammered against my ribs. The old instinct to answer, to serve, to fix kicked in. My hand reached for the button automatically. Then I remembered the payroll ledger. I remembered Trey's laugh. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Then a text message popped up on the screen. "Pick up the phone. Brianna, this is an emergency." I pulled into a Starbucks parking lot. I stared at the phone. It was relentless. He called a third time. I took a deep breath and pressed answer. What I said, my voice flat. "Get back here," Winston roared. His voice was distorted by panic and rage. "The warehouse manager just called. The cold storage unit for the Summit Catering has locked down. The system reset at 9 a.m. and it is asking for the admin password. The sensors are showing a temperature rise. We have $50,000 worth of Wagyu beef and truffles in there. What is the code?" I leaned back in my seat, watching the steam rise from the exhaust of the car in front of me. "I know the code, Dad. I reset it last week for security. It is a 20-character encryption key." "Then tell me," Winston shouted. "Stop playing games. Mike is standing right here. Give me the code." I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 9:20 a.m. I thought about the meeting I had sat through last week where Jamal played Candy Crush while I explained the new security protocols. I thought about Winston telling me I was just overhead. "I am sorry, Dad," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I do not work for Winston Global anymore. I am not authorized to share security clearance codes with external parties." "Are you insane?" Winston screamed. "This is family money. This is the mayor's dinner. If that meat spoils, we are sued. Give me the code, or so help me God. I will call the police and report you for corporate sabotage. You said Jamal is the provider. I said cutting him off. You said Trey builds the brand. You said men are the ones who handle the real business, while I just waste money. Well, Dad, figuring out a password seems like real business to me." "Brianna, do not do this," Winston warned, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You are crossing a line you cannot come back from." "I already crossed it," I said. "You want the code? Ask the vice president of sales. I am sure a man making $250,000 a year can figure out how to reset a thermostat." "That sounds like a man's job to me." I pressed the red button. The shouting stopped instantly. I looked at the contact name Dad on my screen. I scrolled down to the bottom option. Block this caller. I pressed it. Then I did the same for Jamal. And Trey. The phone went silent. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window watching the snowfall. The temperature in that cold storage unit was rising every minute. And for the first time in my life, I did not care. The sun went down over Chicago, but the heat was just rising in the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of Winston Global's yearly calendar, the Senator's re-election gala. 500 of the most powerful people in Illinois were seated under crystal chandeliers, expecting perfection. My father Winston stood at the entrance, shaking hands, smiling his practiced CEO smile. He looked confident. He thought he had survived the morning. He thought Jamal and Trey had stepped up. He told himself that he did not need me. He told himself that men could handle the pressure. He was wrong. The disaster started with the toast. The senator tapped his glass, silencing the room. Waiters moved in sync, pouring the wine. This was the wine I had spent $5,000 of my own money to rescue from customs at 4 in the morning. It was supposed to be a 1996 vintage Bordeaux. The waiters tipped the bottles. The liquid that flowed out was pale yellow. It was not vintage red, it was a cheap Chardonnay meant for a budget wedding scheduled for the following weekend. Jamal had confused the lot numbers on the delivery order because he did not know that Lot A meant air freight and Lot B meant basement bargain. He had sent the senator box wine. A ripple of confusion went through the room. The senator looked at his glass. He took a sip. His face twisted. It tasted like vinegar and regret. He looked at the bottle. It was a brand sold at gas stations. At the same time, the senator's wife leaned over and whispered loudly, "Where are the hydrangeas?" The tables were bare. White tablecloth, silverware, and nothing else. No centerpieces, no floral arrangements, just empty space. Trey, the director of marketing, the man who claimed to build the brand, had forgotten to confirm the florist. He had been too busy posting about the event on TikTok to actually organize the event. He had spent the budget on a custom Snapchat filter for the guests, but forgot to put flowers on the tables. The senator did not wait for the dessert course. He marched across the room to where Winston was standing. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Everyone watched. "Winston, you charged me $50,000 for wine," the senator boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Is this a joke? Is my re-election a joke to you?" Winston stammered. He turned pale. He looked around for me instinctively. His eyes darted to the corner where I usually stood with a headset and a clipboard ready to put out fires. He looked for the daughter who always carried a backup plan in her purse. But I was not there. I was sitting in a coffee shop 5 miles away, building my own future. The spot where I should have been was empty. There was no one to blame. There was no one to fix it. Winston looked at Jamal. Jamal shrank back, dropping his eyes, refusing to make eye contact. He looked at Trey. Trey pretended to be on an important phone call, walking away from the confrontation. The senator threw his napkin on the floor. It landed on Winston's polished shoe. "Get out," he said. "You and your amateur sons, get out of my gala. I will be speaking to my lawyers in the morning." Winston stood there, stripped of his dignity, in front of the entire city elite. 30 years of reputation built on my back crumbled in 30 minutes. He watched the senator walk away. He heard the whispers starting in the crowd. He knew this was the end of his golden era, and for the first time in his life he felt the crushing weight of the roof he had asked his sons to hold. It was collapsing right on top of him. The crystal tumbler shattered against the fireplace mantel, sending shards of glass flying across the Persian rug. Winston stood in the center of his living room, his face a deep shade of purple that clashed with the expensive wallpaper. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Loretta sat on the sofa, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes wide with terror. Jamal and Trey sat in the armchairs looking like schoolboys who had been caught smoking, but their wives, Tiffany and Ashley, stood behind them like angry lionesses ready to defend their territory. "You humiliated me!" Winston roared, his voice shaking the walls. "You made me look like an amateur in front of the senator. Do you know how much business we lost tonight? Do you know how many people are laughing at the name Winston right now?" "It was not my fault," Jamal said quickly, jumping to his feet. He pointed a shaking finger at the empty spot where I usually stood during these family inquisitions. "It was Brianna. She set me up, Dad. She changed the inventory codes before she left. I checked the system this morning and everything looked fine. She must have switched the lot numbers in the database just to make me look bad. She wanted the wine to be wrong. She wanted us to fail." Trey nodded vigorously, his head bobbing like a toy. "Yeah, Dad. She did the same thing with the florist. I called them. I swear I called them. But the order was canceled from the system. She must have used her admin access to wipe the schedule before you locked her out. She sabotaged us." Winston looked at them. He wanted to believe them. He needed to believe them. Because if he did not believe them, then he had to admit that his sons were incompetent and he was a fool. Tiffany stepped forward, her hand resting on Jamal's shoulder. Her voice was sharp and poisonous. "Of course she did it, Winston. Look at how she acted yesterday. She was jealous. She was hateful. She cannot stand that Jamal is successful. She cannot stand that we have a happy marriage and a beautiful life while she is alone. She did this out of spite. She wants to destroy this family because she does not have one of her own. Ashley chimed in, crossing her arms. She is ungrateful, Winston. You gave her a job. You gave her a purpose. And this is how she repays you. By burning down your legacy. She is not just a bad employee, she is a bad daughter. You need to teach her a lesson. You cannot let her get away with this. If you let her walk away after humiliating you, she wins. She needs to know that she cannot bite the hand that feeds her. Loretta sobbed softly. I just do not understand why she is so angry. We raised her better than this. We gave her everything. She is angry because she is nothing. Tiffany spat. She is a nobody without the Winston name. And she knows it. She wants to drag us down to her level. You need to cut her off completely, Winston. Sue her. Destroy her reputation before she destroys yours. Show her what happens when you cross the head of this family. Winston looked at his family. He looked at the lies they were feeding him, and he swallowed them whole because they tasted better than the truth. His eyes hardened. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, vindictive resolve. You are right, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She thinks she is smart. She thinks she can play games with my company. I will show her what a real game looks like. I will make sure she never works in this city again. I will make sure she comes crawling back begging for forgiveness on her knees. He picked up his phone. Get me the legal team on the line, he barked at the empty air. And tell them I want to file a lawsuit for corporate sabotage. I am going to bury her. I was sitting in my living room trying to figure out how to pay my rent without a paycheck when my phone started buzzing. It was not a call. It was a notification from Instagram. Then another. Then 10 more. I opened the app. The first thing I saw was Tiffany's face. She was live streaming. She had filtered the video to make herself look pale and fragile. She was wiping a single tear from her cheek with a manicured finger. Guys, I do not usually do this, she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. But I am just so hurt. My sister-in-law, Brianna, she attacked me today. She has always been jealous of me and Jamal. She cannot stand that we are happy. Today she finally snapped. She tried to ruin our family business just to spite us. She screamed at me. She called me terrible names. I just wanted to help her, but she is so toxic. Please pray for our family. We are going to need it. I watched the comments roll in. Poor Tiffany. She is just jealous of your life, babe. Stay strong, queen. People who had known me for years were liking the video. People I went to college with were commenting heart emojis. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Tiffany the victim. Brianna the angry, bitter aggressor. Then came the second wave. My phone dinged with a screenshot sent by a former coworker. It was from a private Facebook group called the Elite Wives of Chicago. It was a post by Ashley. It read, "Beware of hiring Brianna Winston. We just found out she has been skimming money from the family company for years. That is how she affords her lifestyle while claiming to be broke. We had to let her go for cause. Just a heads up to my ladies, keep your wallets close if she comes around." My stomach dropped. Embezzlement. They were accusing me of a felony. I had never taken a dime that was not mine. I had spent my own money to fix their mistakes, but the truth did not matter. The narrative was already out there. My text messages started coming in, not supportive messages, suspicious ones. A friend from college texted, "Hey Bri, just saw Ashley S. post. Is that true? Did you really steal from your dad?" Another text from a mentor I respected simply said, "I am disappointed." I sat there in the dark of my apartment feeling the walls close in. They were not just letting me go. They were burning me at the stake. They wanted to make sure I could not get another job. They wanted to make sure I had no allies. I looked at the phone glowing in the dark. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post a rebuttal. I wanted to show them the payroll ledger. But I knew it would not matter. They had the audience. They had the sympathy. I was just the angry woman who ruined the party. I turned off my phone and threw it on the couch. Let them talk. Let them lie. They were building a castle on a foundation of sand, and I was the only one who knew the tide was coming in. The knock on my door was not aggressive. It was a soft, polite tap, the kind you would expect from a neighbor borrowing sugar. But when I opened the door, my mother Loretta was standing there clutching her designer handbag like a weapon. She was wearing a coat that cost more than my car, and her face was set in a mask of disappointed martyrdom. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask if I had eaten. She walked past me into my tiny living room, wrinkling her nose at the smell of reheated coffee. "Brianna," she said, her voice trembling with carefully curated emotion. "Look at you, living like this. And look at what you have done to us. Your father is heartbroken. He cannot sleep. He cannot eat. Because of you." I stood by the door, my hand still on the knob. "I am fine, Mom. Thanks for asking. And Dad is probably not sleeping because he is realizing that Jamal cannot run a logistics company." "Do not speak about your brother that way," Loretta snapped, turning on me. "Jamal is doing his best. He is under so much pressure. And instead of helping him, instead of being a good sister, you are tearing him down. You are selfish, Brianna. You have always been selfish. Just because you did not get what you wanted, you decided to ruin it for everyone else. Selfish." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Mom, I worked 80-hour weeks for 10 years. I missed every birthday, every holiday, every weekend. I saved that company $1 million last year alone. And when I asked for fair pay, Dad told me I was just a single woman who did not need it. Is that selfish? Or is it selfish to expect me to work for free so Jamal can buy Tiffany another Chanel bag?" Loretta's face hardened. "That is family business, Brianna. You do not air our laundry in public. You do not humiliate your father. You need to apologize. You need to go back to that office, get on your knees, and beg for forgiveness. You need to fix the mess you made with the senator. You need to tell everyone that you were having a breakdown and that you are sorry. If you do that, maybe your father will let you come back. Maybe he will let you earn your place again." "Earn my place," I repeated, feeling the last shred of respect for her dissolve. "I earned my place every single day. I built that place. And I am not going back to be a servant in a house I helped build." "Then you are no daughter of mine," Loretta said, her voice cold. "You are a disgrace. You are willing to destroy your family over money. You are just like those people who do not know their place. I raised you better." "You raised me to be silent," I said, walking to the door and holding it open. "You raised me to be invisible. But I am done being invisible, Mom. Please leave." She stared at me, shocked that her guilt trip had failed. She adjusted her coat, lifted her chin, and walked out. As she passed me, she whispered, "You will regret this. When you are old and alone with no one to care for you, you will remember that you threw away the only people who loved you." I closed the door, I locked it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. She was wrong. They did not love me. They loved my utility. And now that I was useless to them, I was finally free to be useful to myself. My mother left the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in my cheap hallway like a ghost. I locked the deadbolt. I turned off the lights. I sat in the glow of my laptop screen. It was time. They wanted to play dirty in the streets with rumors and lies. They wanted to use social media to destroy my reputation. I was going to play clean in the boardroom with facts and protocols. I was going to destroy their operation. I pulled up my spreadsheet. It was the Holy Grail. The personal contact information for the 20 biggest clients Winston Global had. These were not just names. They were relationships I had nurtured for a decade. The senator's chief of staff, the logistics director for the city's largest hospital network, the import manager for the luxury car dealership group that trusted us with millions of dollars in inventory. These people did not trust Winston. They did not trust Jamal. They trusted me. I drafted the message. I kept it polite. I kept it corporate. I kept it deadly. Subject line: resignation and handover of accounts. To whom it may concern. Please be advised that effective immediately, I have resigned from my position as Director of Operations at Winston Global. It has been an honor serving you over the last 10 years. For all pending shipments, current customs clearances, and future logistics needs, please contact Jamal Winston, the Vice President of Sales, directly. Then came the masterstroke. I attached a file. It was a PDF titled Standard Operating Procedures and Active Routing Codes. To an outsider, it looked like a helpful guide. To anyone in the industry, it was a treasure map written in hieroglyphics. It contained the HS codes for customs clearance, the specific Incoterms for international freight liability, and the proprietary routing keys for the automated dispatch system. I knew Jamal did not know what an HS code was. I knew he thought Incoterms were insurance policies. I knew he would look at this document and see gibberish. But the clients would see standard data. They would expect him to know how to input these codes to release their cargo. When they called him, they would ask specific questions about the bills of lading and the tariffs. I added Jamal's direct office line and his personal cell phone number to the email body in bold text. I wanted them to call him. I wanted them to ring his phone off the hook. I wanted them to ask him why the harmonized tariff schedule was not matching the commercial invoice. I wanted them to hear the panic in his voice when he realized he was holding the wheel of a speeding car and he did not know which pedal was the brake. I selected all 20 recipients. My finger hovered over the enter key. This was it. The moment I stopped protecting them. The moment I let gravity take its course. I pressed send. The swoosh sound of the email departing was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I closed the laptop. I poured a glass of wine. I looked at the clock. It was 11 p.m. In 9 hours, offices across Chicago would open. In 9 hours, phones would start ringing. And in 9 hours, Jamal Winston would learn that being a man did not make him a manager. The sun was barely up over Lake Michigan, but Jamal Winston's phone was already vibrating itself off the nightstand. It was 8 a.m. He was hungover from celebrating the fact that I was gone. He reached for the phone, squinting at the caller ID. It was not a friend. It was the import manager for the luxury auto group. Jamal cleared his throat, trying to sound professional. "Hello, this is Jamal Winston. Mr. Winston, where are the 3 containers of German parts due at O'Hare this morning?" The voice on the other end was clipped and impatient. "The customs broker says the bill of lading has an incorrect consignee code. The shipment is flagged for inspection. We need the amended BOL immediately." Jamal sat up, blinking. Right. The bill of lading. Let me just check the system." He stumbled out of bed and opened his laptop. He logged into the company portal. He stared at the screen. It was a wall of numbers and codes. He did not know where to look. He did not know what a consignee code was. He thought it was just the address. "Sir, I am looking at it right now," Jamal lied. "Everything seems correct on my end." "Maybe there is a glitch with customs." "There is no glitch," the manager snapped. "The code is wrong. Brianna usually handles this before the plane even lands." "Where is she? Why am I talking to you?" "Brianna is no longer with the company," Jamal said, puffing out his chest. "I am handling all key accounts personally now. I assure you I am more than capable of resolving this minor issue." "Minor issue." The manager laughed, a harsh sound. "Mr. Winston, every hour those parts sit on the tarmac cost me $10,000 in delay penalties. Fix the code. Now." Jamal started sweating. He frantically clicked through the folders. He found the file I had sent him, Standard Operating Procedures. He opened it. He saw the list of codes. HS Tariff. Schedule B. ECCN. It looked like algebra. He did not know which one was the consignee code. He picked a random number and read it out. "Is it 489200? Silence on the other end. "Mr. Winston, are you reading me the harmonic tariff code for rubber gaskets?" "I asked for the consignee code. Do you even know what you are looking at?" "Of course I do," Jamal stammered. "I am just looking at the wrong line. 1 second." "Do not bother," the manager said, his voice ice cold. I am calling the broker myself. And I suggest you figure out how to run your own software before you lose every client your sister built for you. Click. Jamal stared at the phone. Before he could put it down, it rang again. It was the hospital network, then the tech distributor, then the senator's office. They all had questions, they all had problems, and they all realized within 30 seconds that the man on the other end of the line was not a vice president. He was an empty suit. The realization was spreading across the city faster than the morning traffic. Brianna was not just the help. Brianna was the brain. And without the brain, the body was just dead weight. Winston sat in his office, the door locked, staring at his personal banking app. The numbers on the screen were not good. The penalties from the senator's wine fiasco had been the first blow. $50,000 for the correct vintage plus another $20,000 in rush fees and apologies. Then came the refunds for the late medical supplies. Then the chargebacks from the tech distributor for the misrouted server racks. It was a hemorrhage. He tapped the screen, transferring funds from his IRA. He winced as he saw the balance drop. That money was supposed to be for his retirement home in Florida. It was supposed to be for his golf membership. Now it was paying for his son's incompetence, but he couldn't admit that. Admitting that meant admitting he was wrong about Jamal. It meant admitting he was wrong about me, and Winston would rather go broke than be wrong. There was a knock on the door. It was Jamal. He looked frazzled, his tie loosened sweat stains under his arms. "Dad, we have a problem with the payroll account," Jamal said, not meeting his father's eyes. "The bank says there are insufficient funds to cover the driver's overtime this week. They are threatening to walk off the job if they don't get paid by Friday." Winston slammed his phone down on the desk. "Insufficient funds? How is that possible? We just closed the deal with the logistics group last month. Where is that deposit?" "That deposit is still in escrow," Jamal mumbled. "There was an issue with the compliance paperwork. I missed a signature on the environmental impact form." Winston closed his eyes. Another mistake, another delay, another check he had to write. He opened his drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook. He wrote a check for $20,000. He ripped it out of the book with a violent tear. "Here," he said, thrusting it at Jamal. "Pay the drivers and fix the paperwork. Do not come back into this office until that deposit clears. Do you understand?" Jamal took the check, his relief palpable. "Thanks, Dad. You are a lifesaver. I promise I will get on it right away." He turned to leave, but Winston stopped him. "Jamal," Winston said, his voice quiet but dangerous. "This is the last time. This is my retirement money. Do not make me regret trusting you." Jamal nodded quickly and hurried out. Winston watched him go. He felt a twinge of doubt, a small nagging voice in the back of his head that sounded suspiciously like me. "He doesn't know what he's doing, Dad." He pushed the voice away. Jamal just needed time. He just needed to find his rhythm. He was a man. He would figure it out. Winston looked back at his bank balance. It was significantly lighter. He felt a physical pain in his chest, the stress of carrying the weight alone. He picked up his golf club, hoping to find some solace in the rhythm of a swing. But as he looked at the putter, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't just polishing a club anymore. He was holding on to the only thing he had left that felt like control. And even that was starting to slip through his fingers. He took a swing. He missed the cup. For the first time in years, Winston missed. I was sitting in a diner on the south side, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea and staring at my bank account balance on my phone. It was grim. I had enough money for rent and maybe 2 weeks of groceries. I was calculating how long I could survive on ramen noodles when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up expecting a waitress. Instead, I saw a woman wearing a yellow Chanel suit and diamond earrings that cost more than my entire education. It was Ms. Viola. She was a self-made billionaire in the manufacturing sector and one of Winston Global's oldest and most demanding clients. She did not wait for an invitation. She slid into the booth opposite me, her presence instantly making the vinyl seats look cheap. "Ms. Winston," she said, her voice smooth and rich like dark chocolate. "You are a hard woman to find. I called the office looking for you." Your brother Jamal told me you were on a sabbatical. I told him he was a liar. I knew you were gone the moment my shipment of steel beams ended up in Milwaukee instead of Michigan. I sat up straighter. I am sorry about that, Ms. Viola. As Jamal said, I am no longer with the company. I cannot help you with your shipment. I did not come here for the shipment, Brianna Viola said, waving a manicured hand. My team fixed that mess hours ago. I came here for you. You see, I have been doing business with your father for 15 years, and for the last 10 years I knew exactly who was running the show. It was not Winston. It was not those boys. It was you. I do not pay for a brand name, Brianna. I pay for competence. And competence just walked out the door. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. I am canceling my contract with Winston Global effective immediately. I am pulling $2 million a year in business, and I want to give it to you. I blinked. Ms. Viola, I do not have a company. I do not have trucks. I do not have a warehouse. I have a laptop and $300 in my checking account. Viola smiled. You have the brain. You have the contacts. And now you have a backer. I am offering you an angel investment, $500,000 seed money, in exchange for 10% equity. You start your own firm, you take my account, and you take every other client who is tired of dealing with amateurs. I stared at her. $500,000. It was freedom. It was power. It was revenge wrapped in a check. Why, I asked. Why me? Because I know what it is like to be the smartest person in the room and still be asked to fetch the coffee, Viola said. I know what it is like to be a black woman building an empire while men take the credit. I am betting on you, Brianna. Do not make me lose. She pulled a checkbook out of her purse. She wrote the check right there on the sticky table. She slid it across to me. What are you going to call it? I looked at the check. I looked at the woman who saw me when my own father didn't. I thought about the document on my laptop. Onyx, I said. Onyx Logistics. Viola stood up. Good name. Strong. Dark. Valuable. Get to work, Ms. Winston. I expect my next shipment to be on time. She walked out of the diner, leaving me with $500,000 and a future that finally belonged to me. I rented a small office space in the West Loop. It was nothing like the glass tower I had left behind. The carpet was stained coffee brown, and the view was a brick wall, but it was mine. I bought second-hand desks and set up the server myself. I printed the Onyx Logistics logo on plain paper and taped it to the door. It felt more real than any executive suite I had ever sat in. I was just plugging in the coffee maker when there was a knock at the door. I expected a delivery driver. Instead, I saw Mike, the warehouse manager, standing there, holding a cardboard box of his personal belongings. Behind him stood Sarah, the senior dispatcher, and Marcus, the best driver in the fleet. They looked tired. They looked defeated. But when they saw me, their faces lit up with hope. Ms. Winston, Mike said, stepping inside. Or I guess it is just Brianna now. We heard you were setting up shop. We want in. I looked at them. These were the people who actually made Winston Global run. They were the ones who stayed late during the holidays. They were the ones who fixed the mistakes Jamal and Trey made daily. I cannot pay you what my father pays you, I said honestly. Not yet. I can only offer base salary and equity. Sarah laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Brianna's salary does not matter if the check bounces. Jamal missed payroll yesterday. He told us the bank made an error, but we saw him drive up in a new Tesla this morning. He told me to shut up and drive the truck when I asked about my overtime. We are done. We want to work for someone who knows the difference between a pallet and a crate. I hired them on the spot. We spent the afternoon setting up their workstations. It felt like a reunion. It felt like a family. But the peace did not last long. Around 4 o'clock, Mike's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale. It is Winston, he whispered. Put it on speaker, I said. Mike pressed the button. Winston's voice filled the small room, loud and distorted with rage. Mike, where are you? The loading dock is empty. I have drivers sitting here with no manifest. I heard you went to see that traitor daughter of mine. If you are thinking of quitting, you better think again. You signed a non-compete. I will sue you for every dime you have. I will make sure you never work in logistics in this state again. And tell Sarah and Marcus that if they walk out that door, I will call the police and report the company trucks as stolen. Do you hear me? I will destroy you. Micah's hand trembled. He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. Winston wielded fear like a weapon, and he knew exactly where to strike. I reached over and took the phone from Micah's hand. I held it up to my mouth. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "This is Brianna. You might want to check your legal files before you start making threats. You never signed non-compete agreements with the warehouse staff because you classified them as independent contractors to save money on benefits. Remember, you bragged about it at Christmas dinner last year, so they are free agents. And as for the trucks, they are parked legally at the depot. The keys are on your desk. If you want to sue someone, sue Jamal for incompetence, but do not threaten my employees." There was a long silence on the other end. Then the sound of a dial tone. Winston had hung up. I looked at Mike, Sarah, and Marcus. They were staring at me with awe. I handed the phone back. "Welcome to Onyx Logistics," I said. "Let us get to work. We have a lot of clients to call." And for the first time in their careers, they didn't look afraid. They looked ready for war. While the phones at Winston Global sat silent, and the warehouse collected dust, Jamal and Trey decided that the best way to save a sinking ship was to book a first-class flight to Miami. They pitched it to Winston as a critical business development trip. They claimed they were meeting with a shipping magnate who controlled the southern ports, a man who could replace every client I had taken. Winston, desperate for a savior, signed the travel authorization without even looking at the budget. He wanted to believe that his sons were the closers they claimed to be. He wanted to believe that the Winston name still opened doors. He did not realize that his sons were using the company credit card to open bottles of champagne instead. Down in South Beach, the sun was shining, and the reality of Chicago seemed a million miles away. Jamal rented a 60-foot yacht called the Golden Hour. He told the rental agency it was for a corporate retreat. In reality, it was a floating nightclub. Trey stood on the deck wearing designer sunglasses and a swimsuit that cost more than my monthly rent, holding a glass of Dom Perignon. He was not looking for clients. He was looking for the perfect lighting for his Instagram story. He snapped a selfie with Jamal, who was smoking a Cuban cigar that he had charged to the room as client entertainment. They captioned the photo, "Hustle Harder." Hashtag Empire Builders. Hashtag Winston Legacy. They were not alone. Tiffany and Ashley had flown down to join them, refusing to be left out of a luxury vacation. They lounged on the white leather seats, laughing about how stressed Winston sounded on the phone. "Can you believe he asked me to cut back on the spa budget?" Tiffany laughed, sipping her mimosa. "He acts like we are poor. Does he not know that stress causes wrinkles?" Ashley giggled, applying more sunscreen. "He is just panicking because Brianna left. He will get over it. Once the boys close this imaginary deal, we will be back on top. Besides, we deserve this." Dealing with Brianna's drama was exhausting. They clinked glasses, toasting to their own delusion, while the company credit card burned a hole in the atmosphere. Back in Chicago, the heater in the Winston Global office was rattling. It was 40 degrees outside, and the building management had lowered the temperature because the utility bill was overdue. Winston sat at his desk wearing his overcoat, trying to review a stack of cancellation notices from suppliers. The silence in the office was deafening. Then the courier arrived. He dropped a thick envelope on Winston's desk, stamped with the logo of the corporate American Express card. Winston sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. He assumed it was just another monthly statement, another few $1,000s for gas and office supplies. He sliced it open. He pulled out the summary page. His eyes widened. He blinked, thinking he had misread the numbers. He pulled the paper closer. The total due was $32,000 for 3 days. He turned the page to the itemized list. His breath caught in his throat. The Ritz-Carlton South Beach 4 oceanfront suites, the yacht rental fee, a private chef dinner for 4 listed as client meeting, spa treatments for Tiffany and Ashley listed as networking expenses, a bill from a nightclub for 5 bottles of premium vodka. Winston felt a pain in his chest, a sharp squeezing sensation that had nothing to do with the cold office. He looked at the date on the invoice. This was yesterday. While he was firing the cleaning lady to save $200 a week, his sons were spending $20,000 on a boat. He dialed Jamal's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed Trey. Voicemail. He looked at the invoice again. The numbers stared back at him cold and unforgiving. He had called them providers. He had called them pillars. But as he looked at the charge for a $3,000 cabana rental, he realized they were not pillars. They were termites. And they were eating the house from the inside out. For the first time in his life, Winston felt true fear, not because I had left, but because they had stayed. Trey Winston sat in his office nursing a migraine that cost $32,000. He needed a win. He needed to prove that the Miami trip was research, not just a bender. He opened his laptop and looked at the marketing campaign he had designed on the plane ride home. He called it the new service standard. He thought it was brilliant. He thought it showed dedication. He did not run it by legal because legal was expensive and annoying. He did not run it by a focus group because he believed he was the pulse of the culture. He hit publish. The ad went live on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter simultaneously. The image was high contrast black and white. It featured a close-up of a pair of weathered black hands holding a heavy crate. In the background, out of focus, a group of white executives toasted with champagne. The caption read, "We carry the burden so you can carry the glass. Winston Global, the modern servant." Trey leaned back, waiting for the likes. He expected applause for the artistic grittiness. 10 minutes later, the first notification popped up. It was not a like, it was a quote tweet. It read, "Is this a logistics company or a plantation recruitment poster?" Trey frowned. He refreshed the page. The comments were flooding in. One user wrote, "Did they really just call themselves modern servants in 2024? Another wrote, "This is what happens when you have no diversity in the decision room." Oh, the irony. Within an hour, the hashtag Boycott Winston Global was trending in Chicago. Local activists were screenshotting the ad and tagging the senator who had just fired them. The narrative shifted from incompetence to malice. They were not just bad at shipping, they were culturally tone-deaf. They were exploiting their workers and bragging about it. In the corner office, Winston watched the company reputation plummet in real time. His phone began to ring. It was not a client, it was a reporter from the Chicago Tribune asking for a comment on the insensitive imagery. Winston hung up. He looked at the screen. He saw the ad. He saw the caption. He felt the blood drain from his face. He realized that the servant in the picture looked a lot like the drivers he had just underpaid. He marched into Trey's office. Trey was frantically trying to delete the post, but the internet is forever. Screenshots were already on CNN. Winston did not yell. He was past yelling. He walked up to his son and looked at the screen. "You call this branding?" Winston whispered. Trey stammered. "It was supposed to be metaphorical, Dad. It represents hard work. It represents slavery." Trey, Winston said, his voice shaking. "You just told the world that our business model is exploitation. You just gave Brianna the moral high ground. Do you know what Onyx Logistics posted 5 minutes ago?" Trey shook his head, terrified. Winston pulled out his phone. Hold. He showed Trey the screen. It was a simple text post from my new company page. It read, "At Onyx, we do not have servants. We have partners. Fair pay, fair treatment, respect." It had 10,000 likes. "You didn't just kill the brand," Winston said quietly. "You handed the shovel to your sister, and she is burying us alive." I sat in my small office watching the internet tear my brother apart. The Boycott Winston Global hashtag was trending #1 in Chicago. Trey had tried to be edgy and ended up being offensive. He had given me an opening wide enough to drive a semi-truck through. I did not waste a second. I turned to Sarah, my head dispatcher. I told her to get everyone together, Mike the drivers, even the new intern. We stood against the exposed brick wall of our rented office. We did not wear tuxedos. We wore our work clothes. High visibility vests, steel-toed boots, flannel shirts. I set the camera timer. We took a photo. It was not artistic. It was raw. It was real. We were laughing. We looked like a team, not a hierarchy. I uploaded the photo to LinkedIn. I titled the post The Onyx Standard. I wrote a simple caption. We do not have servants. We have specialists. At Onyx Logistics, every hour is paid. Every overtime is honored. Every voice is heard. Transparency is not a premium feature. It is our baseline. Here is our pay structure. Here is our safety record. Here is our promise. We carry your business because we respect ours. I hit post. Then I emailed the link to every client who had just canceled a meeting with my father. I did not mention Winston Global. I did not mention the scandal. I just offered them an alternative to the toxicity. I offered them a life raft. The response was immediate. The phone rang 10 minutes later. It was the director of operations for the regional hospital network. He had been a client of my father's for 20 years. He was a man who valued precision and ethics. Brianna, he said, his voice serious. I saw your post. And I saw what your brother posted. The contrast is striking. We cannot be associated with a vendor who views labor as exploitation. Our board is furious about the servant imagery. I understand, David, I said, my voice calm and professional. At Onyx, we believe that a happy workforce ensures a secure supply chain. If you are looking for a partner who aligns with your values, we are ready to scale up. Send over the contract, David said. We are moving the pharmaceutical account to you effective immediately. That account was worth $3 million a year. It was the backbone of Winston Global's cash flow. And I had just secured it with a JPEG and a sentence. The phone kept ringing. The luxury auto group called. They were tired of Jamal losing their invoices, and now they were embarrassed by the public backlash. They switched. The tech distributor called. They switched. By 5 o'clock, I had onboarded 6 of my father's top 10 clients. I had to hire 3 more dispatchers just to handle the volume. I sat back in my chair listening to the hum of activity in the office. It was the sound of success. My father had told me I wasted money because I cared about people. He told me I was soft. But as I looked at the signed contracts piling up on my desk, I realized the truth. Integrity was not a weakness. It was the most valuable commodity in the market. And Winston Global was bankrupt of it. The City of Chicago logistics contract bid was held in a conference room that smelled of old coffee and high stakes. It was a $10 million government contract to handle all municipal deliveries for the next fiscal year. Every major logistics firm in the Midwest was there. I walked in with Sarah carrying a single binder. Winston walked in with Jamal, Trey, and a team of lawyers carrying 5 boxes of documents. He saw me and stopped. He looked at my simple attire, my small team, and he laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a laugh of genuine amusement. Brianna, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. What are you doing here? Did you come to deliver lunch? This is a government bid. You need a bond rating and a fleet certification. You have a coffee machine and a dream. Go home before you embarrass yourself. Jamal snickered behind him. Yeah, Bree saved the gas money. We have this locked up. We hired a consultant from D.C. to write our proposal. It is bulletproof. I smiled at them. A consultant, I said. That is impressive, Jamal. Did he tell you that the city changed the compliance requirement for emission standards last week? Or did you miss that memo like you missed the port payment? Jamal frowned. What memo? The city manager called the meeting to order. Each company had 10 minutes to present. Winston went first. He stood at the podium and talked about legacy. He talked about his 30 years in business. He talked about relationships. He did not talk about numbers. He did not talk about efficiency. He thought his name was enough. Then it was my turn. I did not talk about myself. I talked about the city. I put up a slide showing the current inefficiency in their routing system. I showed them how Onyx's algorithm could reduce their fuel costs by 20%. I showed them my safety rating, which was perfect because I paid my drivers enough to care. And then I showed them my price. It was 15% lower than Winston S. because I did not have to pay for a yacht in Miami or a consultant in DC. The city manager looked at my proposal. He looked at Winston S. proposal. He looked at me. Ms. Winston, he said, your bid is comprehensive, and your references are impeccable. The hospital network speaks very highly of your transition team. Winston stood up. Wait a minute. She is a one-woman show. She cannot handle this volume. She does not have the infrastructure. Actually, Mr. Winston, the city manager, corrected him. Her proposal includes a partnership agreement with the electric vehicle fleet downtown. She has more trucks available than you do, and her overhead is significantly lower. The contract is awarded to Onyx Logistics. The room erupted in whispers. Winston sat down heavily. He looked at Jamal. He looked at Trey. He looked at me. And for the first time, he did not see a secretary. He saw a shark. I walked past him on my way out. Good game, Dad, I whispered. But next time, read the memo. Winston walked back into the Winston Global headquarters. The sign above the door looked a little less shiny than it used to. He walked past the reception desk. It was empty. The receptionist had quit 2 days ago because her paycheck bounced. He walked past the sales floor. It was silent. No phones ringing, no deals closing. He saw Jamal's office. Jamal was there. But he wasn't working. He was asleep. His feet were up on the desk, his mouth open, snoring softly. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat next to his laptop. Winston felt a vein throb in his temple. He walked past Trey's office. Trey was playing a video game on his phone wearing noise-canceling headphones. He didn't even notice Winston walk by. Winston went into his own office and closed the door. He sat down at his mahogany desk. There was a stack of mail waiting for him. He picked up the first envelope. It was from the bank. Notice of default. The credit line was maxed out. The payments were overdue. They were threatening to freeze the operating accounts. He picked up the second envelope. It was from the insurance company. Policy cancellation notice. Non-payment of premium. He picked up the third envelope. It was a lawsuit. A supplier was suing for breach of contract. Winston dropped the letters. His hands were shaking. He looked around his office. The golf clubs in the corner. The awards on the wall. It all felt like a lie. He thought about the bid meeting. He thought about me standing there calm and prepared. He thought about the city manager awarding the contract to Onyx. He thought about Jamal sleeping in his office. He thought about Trey playing games. A terrible realization began to dawn on him. It was a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He had bet on the wrong horses. He had spent 30 years building this company for his sons. He had groomed them. He had protected them. He had paid them more than they were worth because he believed they were the future. And they were destroying it. They were lazy. They were entitled. They were incompetent. And the one person who could have saved it, the one person who actually knew how to run the business, was the daughter he had driven away. He picked up the phone. He dialed Jamal's extension. Jamal picked up groggily. Yeah, what is it? Get in here, Winston said, his voice low and dangerous. And bring your brother. We need to talk about the future of this company. Because if you do not wake up right now, there won't be a company left to inherit. Jamal sighed. Can it wait, Dad? I have a headache. No, Winston roared, slamming his fist on the desk. It cannot wait. Get in here now before I fire you both and burn this building down myself. He hung up. He looked at the family photo on his desk. He looked at my face in the back row. He remembered what I said. I am the competition. He realized with a sinking heart that I wasn't just the competition. I was the executioner, and he had handed me the axe. The atmosphere in the Winston library was toxic. The air conditioner was off to save money, and the room smelled of stale cigar smoke and desperation. Winston sat in his leather chair staring at the wall. He looked like a man who had lost his kingdom. But Tiffany was not ready to be a peasant. She paced back and forth in front of him, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She was wearing a dress she had bought with the last of the company credit line, and she was furious. "You are letting her win, Winston," Tiffany hissed. "You are sitting here feeling sorry for yourself while your daughter laughs at you from her new office. Do you really think she won that city contract on merit? Do you really think she built a multi-million-dollar company in 2 weeks because she is smart?" Winston looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "What are you saying, Tiffany?" "I am saying she stole it," Tiffany said, leaning over the desk. "She took the client list. She took the pricing models. She took the proprietary software codes. That is theft, Winston. That is corporate espionage. She did not just quit. She robbed you, and you are letting her get away with it." Winston sat up straighter. The fog of depression began to lift, replaced by a familiar anger. He needed a villain, and Tiffany had just handed him one. It made perfect sense. Brianna could not be better than Jamal. She must have cheated. "She signed a contract," Winston muttered. "Every employee signs a confidentiality agreement. And a non-compete clause." "Exactly," Tiffany said, her eyes gleaming. "She is in breach of contract. She is operating illegally. You can sue her, you can shut her down, you can freeze her assets. You can take every dime she has made and put it back in this family where it belongs. Call the lawyers, Winston. Sue her for everything she has." Winston picked up the phone. His hand was steady for the first time in weeks. "Get me the legal team," he barked. "I want to file a lawsuit against Onyx Logistics. Immediate injunction, theft of trade secrets, breach of contract. I want her shut down by noon." Across town, the mood at Onyx Logistics was electric. We were processing the first wave of city orders. The phones were ringing, the drivers were moving. I was standing at the whiteboard mapping out the new routing system when the front door opened. The office went silent. Two men walked in. One was wearing a sheriff deputy uniform. The other was a process server in a cheap suit. They looked out of place in our busy hub of productivity. They scanned the room. "I am looking for Brianna Winston," the deputy announced, his voice booming. I stepped forward. "I am Brianna." The process server walked up to me. He thrust a thick envelope into my hands. "You are being served, ma'am. Civil lawsuit. Winston Global versus Brianna Winston and Onyx Logistics. You are ordered to appear in court on Monday. Until then, you are served with a cease and desist order regarding the use of any stolen proprietary information." The room gasped. Sarah stood up, her face pale. Mike looked like he wanted to fight the deputy. I looked down at the paperwork. The words jumped out at me. Theft, fraud, breach, damages sought $5 million. I looked at the deputy. "Thank you, officer. You can leave now." They walked out. I stood there holding the weight of my father's hatred in my hands. He was not just trying to beat me in business. He was trying to criminalize my success. He was trying to erase me. I looked at my team. They were watching me, waiting to see if I would crumble, waiting to see if the girl who used to fetch coffee would fold under the pressure. I did not fold. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Get back to work, everyone," I said, tossing the envelope onto my desk. "My father wants a war. He thinks he can sue me for breaking a contract. But he forgot one very important detail. He never gave me a contract to sign. He thought I wasn't worth the paper, and that mistake is going to cost him everything." I walked into the law offices of Sterling and Associates. This was the firm Viola had recommended, the most aggressive corporate litigators in Chicago. I was carrying a banker's box full of documents. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I was not the defendant, I was the prosecutor. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me in a conference room that overlooked the city. He was a tall man with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. He looked at the lawsuit Winston had filed. He laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound. "This is a scare tactic, Ms. Winston," he said, tossing the papers onto the table. "He has no case. You cannot steal trade secrets that you developed yourself, especially when there is no employment contract defining them as company property. And the non-compete claim is laughable. Where is the contract? I opened my box. That is the point, Mr. Sterling, I said. There is no contract. My father never gave me one. He hired me as a consultant 10 years ago to avoid paying payroll taxes and health insurance. He paid me through a 1099 form. Technically, I was never an employee. I was a vendor, and vendors are free to take their business elsewhere. Sterling's eyes lit up. He is suing a vendor for quitting. That is rich. But wait, it gets better. I pulled out a stack of payroll records. These are the payment stubs for Jamal and Trey. And here are mine. You can see the discrepancy. But look closer at the tax filings. My father classified Jamal and Trey as executives with full benefits and stock options. But he classified me as an independent contractor doing the exact same work. That is misclassification, Mr. Sterling. That is tax fraud. He owes the IRS back taxes on my employment for a decade. Sterling picked up the papers. He scanned them, his smile widening. And here I pulled out another folder. These are the emails where I asked for a contract and benefits. And here are his replies telling me that women do not need benefits because they should be on their husband's plan. That is gender discrimination. That is a violation of the Equal Pay Act. I kept pulling out documents. Safety violations in the warehouse that I fixed and he ignored. Overtime wages he refused to pay the drivers. The slush fund he used to pay for Tiffany's personal expenses. I laid it all out on the table. It was an autopsy of a corrupt business. Sterling looked at the pile of evidence. Ms. Winston, he said, his voice filled with professional admiration. You did not just bring me a defense. You brought me a nuclear warhead. We are not just going to get this lawsuit dismissed. We are going to countersue. We are going to sue for back wages. We are going to sue for discrimination. We are going to sue for defamation. And we are going to report him to the Department of Labor and the IRS. By the time we are done, Winston Global will be lucky if they can afford a stapler. I looked at the evidence of my father's greed. I thought about the years I spent protecting him from these exact consequences. I thought about him calling me nothing. File it, I said. File everything. He wanted a court battle. Let us give him a war. The mediation room was lined with mahogany books that had never been read and smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. My father sat on the opposite side of the long conference table, flanked by Jamal and his lead attorney, Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a man who charged $1,000 an hour to bully people into submission. He had a stack of files in front of him that was 6 inches thick. He looked at me with a predatory smile. He thought I was just a girl who had played dress-up in her father's office. He thought this would be quick. We are not here to negotiate. Henderson began, his voice booming off the walls. We are here to dictate terms. Ms. Winston, you have stolen trade secrets, client lists, and proprietary data from Winston Global. You have violated your fiduciary duty and your employment contract. We are demanding the immediate dissolution of Onyx Logistics and $5 million in damages. If you do not agree to these terms today, we will bury you in litigation for the next decade. Winston nodded, crossing his arms. He looked at me with that familiar disappointment. Just sign the papers, Brianna, he said. Stop this foolishness. Come home, and maybe I will let you work in the mailroom until you pay off your debt. I did not speak. I looked at Mr. Sterling, my lawyer. He was sitting calmly playing with a silver pen. He waited for Henderson to finish his theatrics. Then he cleared his throat. Are you finished? Mr. Henderson, Sterling asked softly. Because you seem to be missing a very important piece of paper. Henderson scoffed. We have everything we need. Do you? Sterling asked. You mentioned a breach of employment contract. You mentioned a non-compete clause. I have reviewed the files you sent over. I see the employee handbook. I see the code of conduct. But I do not see a signed employment contract for Ms. Winston. Winston frowned. She is my daughter. She has worked there for 10 years. Of course she has a contract. Actually, she does not. Sterling said, sliding a single piece of paper across the table. This is Ms. Winston's tax return from last year, and the year before, and the year before that. You will notice that she was not paid via a W-2 form like a standard employee. She was paid via a 1099 form. Henderson picked up the paper. His smile faltered. For 10 years, Mr. Winston, you classified Brianna as an independent contractor. Sterling continued, his voice sharpening like a blade. You did this to avoid paying payroll taxes, Social Security, and health insurance. You wanted to save money. But here is the thing about independent contractors. They are not employees. They are separate business entities. And unless there is a specific contract stating otherwise, an independent contractor owns their own work product. The client list, the routing systems, the strategies. Brianna developed them. She owns them. She did not steal from you. Steal. She simply took her intellectual property and left. Winston turned pale. That is a technicality, he sputtered. She worked for me. She sat at a desk I paid for. It is the law, Sterling said, slamming his hand on the table. And since you want to talk about the law, let us talk about the IRS. If you insist that she was an employee, then you have admitted to federal tax fraud. You owe the government 10 years of back taxes and penalties for misclassifying her. You also owe Ms. Winston 10 years of overtime pay, vacation pay, and benefits. I have the lawsuit drafted right here. We are countersuing for $2 million in unpaid wages. Henderson looked at Winston. He looked at the tax returns. He realized he had walked into a trap. He closed his folder. Mr. Winston Henderson whispered, his aggression gone. We need to take a recess. No recess, Sterling said, standing up. You drop this lawsuit right now. You issue a public statement clearing Ms. Winston of any wrongdoing. Or I walk out of here and go straight to the Department of Labor. Winston looked at me. His eyes were wide with shock. He had spent a decade trying to save pennies on my salary, and now those pennies were about to cost him his fortune. He opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. He slumped in his chair, defeated by his own greed. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. It was nice seeing you, Dad, I said. Next time you want to own someone, make sure you actually buy them first. I sat in the back of a dimly lit jazz club on the north side waiting for Kenji. He was an old friend from my days auditing for the bank, a forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a haystack of millions. He walked in, clutching a leather briefcase, looking over his shoulder. He looked nervous. He had every right to be. What he was carrying was not just data, it was a death sentence for the Winston family reputation. He slid into the booth and ordered a water. He did not say hello. He just unlocked his tablet and pushed it across the table toward me. You were right, Brianna, Kenji said, his voice barely a whisper. I ran the trace on the secondary corporate credit cards issued to Tiffany and Ashley. The ones listed under image consulting and event planning expenses. The accounting department coded them as miscellaneous overhead, so your father never looked at the itemized breakdown. But I did. And Brianna, it is ugly. I looked at the screen. The glow of the spreadsheet illuminated the darkness. I saw Tiffany's file first. I expected to see shopping sprees. I expected Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. There were plenty of those, but they were just the tip of the iceberg. I scrolled down. There were recurring charges for $50,000 to a shell company in Nevada. I looked at Kenji. Online gambling, Kenji explained. High-stakes poker apps and wire transfers to a private bookie in Las Vegas. Tiffany is not just a shopper, Brianna, she is a degenerate gambler. She is down $400,000 this year alone. She has been using the company credit line to pay off her markers. See those entries labeled venue deposit? Those are not venues. Those are payments to a debt collector who breaks kneecaps for a living. I felt a cold chill. Tiffany, the woman who stood in my father's living room and called me a thief, was stealing $500,000 to feed an addiction. I swiped to the next tab. Ashley. The perfect wife. The woman who posted Bible verses on Facebook every Sunday. Her statement was different. It was cleaner but darker. I saw charges for the Peninsula Hotel, a suite booked every Tuesday afternoon. I saw purchases at a men's boutique for Italian suits in a size 40 regular. Trey wore a size 44. I saw tuition payments for a fencing school. Ashley did not fence. And neither did Trey. Who is Stefano? I asked, pointing to a recurring monthly payment of $5,000 listed as wellness coaching. Kenji sighed. Stefano is a 24-year-old personal trainer at the Equinox Gym downtown. I pulled his social media. He is wearing the watch listed on Ashley's statement in his profile picture, and he lives in an apartment that is being paid for by a shell company registered to Ashley's maiden name, funded by Winston Global. She is keeping a boy toy, Brianna. She is using your father's money to pay for her affair. I sat back in the booth. The room spun slightly. I had thought they were just greedy. I had thought they were just entitled. But this was different. This was rot. Deep systemic moral rot. While my father was selling his retirement fund to pay for their mistakes, they were laughing at him. Tiffany was betting against the house, and Ashley was sleeping outside of it. And they had the audacity to call me the disgrace. I looked at Kenji. Can you export this? I asked. I need certified copies. I need the bank tracking numbers. I need proof that cannot be denied in a court of law or a ballroom. Kenji tapped the screen. It is already in your inbox, but Brianna, be careful. This is not just business anymore. If you release this, you destroy their marriages. You destroy their lives. I looked at the tablet one last time. I looked at the date of the last transaction. It was yesterday. Tiffany had lost $5,000 on a blackjack hand while I was sitting in a mediation room fighting for my dignity. They tried to destroy my life, Kenji, I said, picking up my purse. They tried to send me to jail. They tried to ruin my name. I am not going to destroy their lives. I am just going to turn on the lights. And whatever happens after that is entirely up to them. I walked out of the club into the night. The air was crisp. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had the gun, I had the bullets, and I knew exactly when I was going to pull the trigger. The charity gala was in 2 days. It was time for the Winstons to finally pay their debts. I walked into the ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton wearing a cream-colored silk gown that I had bought with my first dividend check from Onyx Logistics. For 10 years I had attended this gala standing in the shadows holding my father's coat and ensuring his guests had enough champagne. Tonight I walked in through the front doors as a platinum sponsor. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering diamonds, but when I entered the noise level dropped noticeably. Heads turned. I saw the whispers moving like a wave across the room. They were looking at the woman who had brought the great Winston Global to its knees. I saw my family near the center of the room. Winston was holding a glass of scotch, his hand shaking slightly. Jamal and Trey were huddled together looking nervous. And then there was Tiffany. She saw me and her eyes narrowed into slits. She was wearing a red dress that matched the fury on her face. She whispered something to Ashley and began to move toward me. She did not walk like a lady. She stalked like a predator who had been backed into a corner. I stopped near the fountain waiting for her. I knew she would come. She could not help herself. She needed to mark her territory. Tiffany stopped 2 feet in front of me, blocking my path. She held a large glass of dark crimson Cabernet in her hand. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here, Brianna. She spat, her voice low and venomous. This is a family event, not a networking opportunity for traders. I smiled at her. It was a polite, cold smile. I am just here to support the children, Tiffany. And since Onyx Logistics just donated $50,000 to the pediatric wing, I believe I have every right to be here. Tiffany's face twisted. You think you are so special, don't you? You think because you stole a few contracts, you are one of us. You will never be one of us. You are just the help, Brianna. You are just the little worker bee who forgot her place. She took a step closer. Step. She pretended to stumble. It was a clumsy theatrical movement. She thrust her hand forward and the entire glass of red wine splashed across the front of my cream silk gown. The cold liquid soaked through the fabric, instantly looking like a jagged wound across my chest. The room gasped. The music seemed to stop. 500 people froze, staring at the red stain spreading on my dress. Tiffany covered her mouth with a feigned look of shock. "Oh my God," she cried loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am so clumsy. Look at you, Brianna. You are a mess. You should probably leave. You cannot be seen looking like trash." I looked down at the stain. Then I looked at Winston, who was watching from across the room. He did not step forward. He did not reprimand her. He looked relieved. He thought this was it. He thought I would run away in shame just like I always had. He thought I would retreat to the bathroom and cry. I did not run. I did not cry. I reached into my purse and pulled out a tissue. I dabbed the stain gently, not to clean it, but to acknowledge it. Then I looked at Tiffany. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said, my voice calm and projecting through the silence. "I was worried this dress was too plain. You just gave it the splash of color it needed." I stepped around her. I did not walk toward the exit. I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me, their eyes wide with confusion and anticipation. I walked up the stairs to the podium. The host looked at me, unsure of what to do. I gently took the microphone from his hand. I stood there, the red stain bright against the white silk, looking like a warrior who had just walked off a battlefield. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at my father. And I smiled. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the interruption and for my appearance. My sister-in-law, Tiffany, was just trying to help me understand something. She told me moments ago that I do not belong here. She told me that I am a thief who stole from the family legacy. She accused me of taking money that did not belong to me." I gripped the podium. My knuckles were white, but my voice was steady, amplifying clearly through the ballroom speakers. The room was deathly silent. Everyone was watching the woman in the wine-stained silk dress. Winston was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and fear. He knew that tone. It was the tone I used when I had bad news about a shipment. But this was not a shipment. This was a reckoning. But since we are all here to support transparency and charity, I think it is time we clarify where the money in the Winston family is actually going. I have been accused of embezzlement. So let us look at the books. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote clicker. I had bribed the audio-visual technician on my way in. I pointed it at the massive projection screen behind me, which was currently displaying the logo of the Children's Hospital. I pressed the button. The screen flickered. The logo disappeared. In its place, a massive high-definition spreadsheet appeared. It was magnified so that every row was visible to the back of the room. The header read, "Winston Global Corporate Credit Card Statement. Authorized user, Tiffany Winston." A collective gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen had been sucked out at once. I turned to look at the screen, reading the lines out loud. Item 1. May 4th, $5,000. The Golden Lotus Spa. Item 2. May 5th, $10,000. Saks Fifth Avenue. Item 3. May 6th, $50,000. Wire transfer to NV Holdings Las Vegas. I looked down at Tiffany. She was standing near the stage, her face draining of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. NV Holdings is a debt collection agency for online gambling sites. "Tiffany," I said, my voice echoing. "You called me a thief. But it seems you have gambled away $250,000 of company money in 6 months. That is my father's retirement fund you are betting on black." I clicked the button again. The screen changed. Now it read, "Authorized user Ashley Winston." And Ashley, the moral compass of the family. I continued. "Let us see your contributions. June 1st, $2,000. The Peninsula Hotel Suite, 402. June 8th, $2,000. The Peninsula Hotel Suite, 4:02. Recurring every Tuesday afternoon. And here, June 10th. $5,000. Milano menswear. A suit. Size 40 regular. I looked at Trey. He was standing next to Ashley holding a glass of champagne. He looked at the screen. He looked at his wife. Trey, you wear a size 44? I said softly. Who is wearing that suit, Trey? Because my father paid for it. Winston felt his heart stop. He looked at the screen. The numbers were undeniable. The dates matched the days his cash flow had dried up. He looked at Tiffany, who was shaking. He looked at Ashley, who was refusing to look at Trey. He realized with a sickening jolt that while he was hunting me down for trying to save his business, he was sleeping under the same roof as the people who were bleeding him dry. The room erupted. It wasn't polite whispering anymore. It was a roar of shock and scandal. Phones were out recording everything. The senator was shaking his head in disgust. The facade of the perfect Winston family shattered into a million pieces right there on the stage. I looked at my father one last time. The wine stain on my dress felt like a badge of honor now. You wanted the truth, Dad, I said into the microphone. You just couldn't afford it. I placed the mic on the podium. It made a loud thud that sounded like a gavel closing a case. I walked off the stage, leaving the numbers shining bright and cruel behind me. The drive back to the Winston estate was silent. It was the silence of a funeral procession. But the moment the heavy oak doors of the mansion closed behind them, the silence shattered. It did not start with a conversation. It started with a scream. Jamal threw his tuxedo jacket onto the marble floor and turned on Tiffany. His face was twisted with a rage that had been building for years. You gambled it away, he shouted, his voice cracking. $250,000, Tiffany. That was the company operating capital. That was my future. You stood there and told me you were investing in your image. You were playing poker on an app. Tiffany did not cry. She did not apologize. She dropped the act she had been playing for 5 years. She kicked off her heels and looked at Jamal with pure disgust. Your future, she laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. What future, Jamal? You are a 35-year-old man who still asks his daddy for allowance. You do not have a future. You have a surname. And now, thanks to your sister, even that is worthless. I spent that money because it was the only thing about you that was interesting. Jamal stepped back as if slapped. You said you loved me. I loved the lifestyle, Tiffany spat. I loved the credit limit. But now the limit is reached. I am calling my lawyer in the morning. I am filing for divorce. And I am taking half of everything. The house, the cars, the jewelry. Half of nothing is nothing, Jamal screamed. Dad is broke. Then I will take the liquid assets, Tiffany said, cold and calculating. I will take what is left before the bank gets it. In the living room, Trey was shaking. He was holding Ashley by the arm. His grip was tight, desperate. Who is he? Trey whispered. Who is size 40 regular? Tell me his name, Ashley. Ashley pulled her arm away. She smoothed her dress, looking at Trey like he was a stain on her shoe. His name is Stefano, she said calmly. And he is everything you are not. He is strong. He is decisive. And he doesn't need his sister to tie his shoes for him. Trey fell back onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. You are sleeping with a personal trainer on my dime. I am sleeping with a man, Ashley corrected. You are just a boy, Trey. A boy playing dress-up in a business suit. I am done babysitting. I want a divorce. I want the condo in the Gold Coast, and I want a lump sum alimony payment by Friday. Winston stood by the fireplace. He watched his daughters-in-law transform into vultures. He watched his sons crumble into weeping heaps of self-pity. He realized then that the thieves were not outside the gate. They were sitting at his dinner table. He had raised sons who were weak, and he had welcomed women who were predators. He looked at the chaos, the screaming, the demands for money that did not exist. And he realized that the only person who had ever actually tried to protect this family was the one he had just destroyed. He poured himself a drink, but his hand shook so badly the glass clinked against the crystal decanter. It was the sound of an empire ending not with a bang, but with a domestic brawl. The sun rose over the ruins of the Winston family, but it did not bring warmth. It brought the repo men. Trey was the first to face the music. He was sleeping on the couch in his downtown loft because Ashley had locked the bedroom door. He was woken by the grinding sound of a diesel engine idling loudly directly beneath his window. He stumbled to the balcony, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. He looked down. A massive flatbed truck was parked in the loading zone. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit was hooking heavy chains to the front axle of the Porsche Cayenne. Trey felt a surge of panic that started in his stomach and choked his throat. He ran out of the apartment barefoot, wearing only his silk boxers and a wrinkled t-shirt. He sprinted down the stairs and burst onto the sidewalk, his breath clouding in the morning air. "Hey!" he screamed, running toward the tow truck driver. "What are you doing? Get your hands off my car. That is a company vehicle. You cannot touch that. I am the director of marketing." The driver did not stop winding the winch. He pulled a lever, and the cable tightened with a metallic groan, dragging the sleek black SUV up the ramp. "I have a repossession order, buddy," the driver said without looking at Trey. Winston Global defaulted on its fleet financing agreement at midnight. The bank owns this car now. "No," Trey shouted, grabbing the door handle as if he could physically hold the car back with his weak hands. "My father pays the bills. Call him. This is a mistake. I have a meeting at 10. The driver handed Trey a crumpled piece of paper. It was a court order. "It is not a mistake, kid. The accounts are frozen. The lease is terminated. Step away from the vehicle or I will call the police for obstruction." Trey watched helplessly as the car, his symbol of success, his identity, his entire personality on wheels, was hoisted into the air. He stood on the cold pavement shivering, realizing he did not even have a subway card to get to the office. Across town in the wealthy suburbs, Jamal was facing a nightmare that was even worse. He was standing in the driveway of his 5-bedroom colonial villa. A sheriff deputy was taping a bright orange notice to the front door. Eviction notice. Foreclosure proceedings. Jamal was still wearing yesterday's tuxedo pants, his shirt unbuttoned. He looked at the bank representative, a woman in a gray suit who looked at him with zero sympathy. "Mr. Winston," she said, checking a clipboard, "you have 2 hours to vacate the premises. The deed to this property was used as collateral for the business line of credit last year. Since the line is in default, the bank is exercising its right to seize the asset immediately." "But my kids live here," Jamal pleaded, his voice breaking. "You cannot just throw us on the street." "You should have thought of that before you spent the mortgage money on a yacht in Miami," the woman said, cold and factual. Behind him, the front door opened. Tiffany walked out. She was not crying. She was dragging 2 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases. She stepped past Jamal, not even looking at him. She walked straight to a waiting taxi she had called 10 minutes ago. "Tiffany," Jamal cried, reaching out for her. "Where are you going? We have to fight this. Help me talk to them." "I am going to my mother's," Tiffany said, popping the trunk of the taxi. "And I am taking the jewelry." "You can keep the debt, Jamal. It is the only thing you ever actually earned." She got into the car and drove away, leaving Jamal standing on the manicured lawn of a house he no longer owned, watching the sheriff change the locks on the life he had failed to protect. The collapse of Winston Global did not sound like a crash. It sounded like the sharp beep of a card reader denying access. At 9 o'clock on Monday morning, the main operating accounts were officially frozen by federal bank regulators due to the investigation into tax fraud and the suspicious wire transfers to Nevada. The automated payroll system shut down instantly. Across the building, phones lit up with text alerts from banks telling 300 employees that their direct deposits had been reversed. The reaction was immediate and terrifyingly quiet. There was no riot. There was just a cold, hard stop. In the warehouse, the forklifts turned off in unison. The drivers who were loading the few remaining trucks simply turned off the ignitions, took their keys, and walked away. They did not shout. They did not ask for explanations. They had seen the news. They had seen the gala. They knew the ship was sinking, and they were not going to drown with it. Winston sat in his executive suite. The lights were off because the power company had cut the commercial line an hour ago due to non-payment. He sat in the gray gloom of the morning, listening to the sound of his legacy walking out the door. He saw his executive assistant of 20 years pack a box with her photos and stapler. She looked at his glass door. She did not wave. She did not look sad. She looked relieved. She placed her badge on the reception desk, and the click echoed through the empty floor like a gunshot. He was alone. The silence was absolute. For 30 years, this building had hummed with the noise of commerce, phones ringing, printers whirring, people arguing over logistics. Now the only sound was the wind rattling the window pane and the low hum of the backup emergency lights casting eerie red shadows on the walls. He looked at his desk. It was covered in demand letters and legal threats. But the one that terrified him the most was the calendar. The governor's summit. The most important event in the state's history was 48 hours away. It was the contract that was supposed to save him. But he had no trucks. He had no money. He had no staff. He had no sons to bail him out. He poured the last drop of scotch from the decanter into his glass. It was warm and tasted like failure. He took a sip and closed his eyes. He had wanted to be a king. He had wanted a dynasty. Instead, he was just an old man sitting in the dark wearing a stained tuxedo waiting for the end. The red emergency light pulsed in the hallway like a dying heartbeat. It was the only movement in the abandoned headquarters of Winston Global. The warehouse floor below was silent. No truck engines revving, no forklifts beeping, just the hollow echo of a dead empire. Winston sat at his desk staring at the calendar. The date was circled in red marker. The governor's summit. It was 48 hours away. It was the largest diplomatic event in the state's history. 500 dignitaries, Secret Service details, high-level security clearance required for every crate of equipment. And Winston Global was contractually obligated to manage every single piece of it. The phone on his desk rang. It was not the general line. It was the encrypted private line reserved for government officials. Winston stared at it. He knew who it was. It was the governor's chief of staff. He let it ring 4 times before his trembling hand picked up the receiver. Winston. The voice on the other end was not friendly. It was cold steel. We are tracking your fleet GPS. Why are the trucks not moving? The security perimeter setup begins in 6 hours. We need the barriers. We need the staging equipment. Why is your depot dark? Winston cleared his throat. His voice sounded like sandpaper. We are experiencing a slight technical delay. A personnel issue. We will have it resolved shortly. Do not lie to me, Winston, the chief of staff snapped. We know your accounts are frozen. We know your staff walked out. Listen to me very carefully. This is not a wedding. This is a matter of national security. You signed a performance bond. If those trucks do not roll by noon today, you are not just in breach of contract. You are in violation of a federal security mandate. That is not a fine, Winston. That is fraud. That is 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Do you understand? You will not retire on a golf course. You will die in a cell. Fix this, or I will send the National Guard to break down your doors and drag you out in handcuffs. The line went dead. Winston dropped the phone. It clattered against the wood. Prison. He was going to prison. He looked at the whiteboard on the wall. The logistics map for the summit was complex. It required precision. It required a mastermind. It required someone who knew the codes, the routes, and the security protocols. He looked at the empty chairs where Jamal and Trey used to sit. They could not even organize a birthday party. There was only one person in the world who could move this mountain in 48 hours. He looked at his cell phone. He hated himself for what he had to do, but he hated the idea of a cage even more. He dialed the number he had blocked weeks ago. I sat in the corner office of Onyx Logistics overlooking the city skyline. The sun was streaming in, illuminating the team of dispatchers who were efficiently managing routes that used to belong to my father. The atmosphere was calm, professional, and profitable. Then my personal cell phone began to ring. I looked at the screen. It was a number I had unblocked only an hour ago, knowing that this moment was inevitable. It was Winston. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the silence. On the fourth ring, I swiped the green button. I did not say hello. I simply listened. All I could hear was heavy, ragged breathing. It sounded like a man who was drowning. Brianna. His voice was a whisper, a broken husk of the boom that used to terrorize boardrooms. Brianna, are you there? I am here, Winston. I said, my voice cool and detached. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. What do you want? I need help, he stammered. The governor's office just called. The summit contract. They are threatening to send the federal marshals. They said it is fraud. They said I am going to prison, Brianna. 5 years. I cannot go to prison. I am an old man. I will die in there. That sounds like a difficult situation, I replied, leaning back in my leather chair. But I fail to see how that is my problem. You have 2 sons who are highly paid executives. Surely Jamal can coordinate the fleet. He is gone. Winston sobbed. He actually sobbed. A sound I had never heard in 32 years. Jamal left. He took the petty cash and ran. Trey is gone. The staff is gone. I am sitting here in the dark, Brianna. The power is cut. I have 50 trucks that need to move in 3 hours, and I do not even know where the keys are. I do not know the security codes. I do not know the routes. I am begging you. I looked out the window at the city below. I remembered him telling me I was greedy. I remembered him telling me I was just a single woman who needed to know her place. You told me I was overhead, Winston, I said softly. You told me I was easily replaced, so replace me. I can't, he cried, his voice cracking with humiliation. I was wrong. I was so wrong. You were the only one. You were always the only one. I am on my knees, Brianna. I am begging you. Please save me. I will do anything. Just don't let them take me to jail. I closed my eyes. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was pity. He was small. He was pathetic. He was broken. Anything I asked. Anything Winston promised. Name your price. I opened my eyes. I checked my watch. I will be there in 20 minutes. Have your lawyers ready. And Dad, when I walk through those doors, I am not walking in as your daughter. I am walking in as your owner. I walked into the conference room where I had spent 10 years taking notes for men who did not know how to read a balance sheet. The emergency lights were bathing the room in a bloody red glow. Winston was sitting at the head of the table. He looked small, his tuxedo was crumpled, and he had not shaved. He looked up at me with hope in his eyes, a desperate hope that I was just going to write a check and make the bad men go away. He did not see Mr. Sterling standing behind me holding a leather binder. Thank God you are here, Brianna, Winston said, standing up shakily. The trucks are at the depot. If we get the drivers back now, we can make the noon deadline. Just tell me what you need. A loan, a partnership. We can work it out. I did not sit down. Mr. Sterling walked forward and placed a single document on the mahogany table. He slid it across to Winston. We are not partners, Winston, I said, my voice filling the silent room. This is an acquisition agreement. Onyx Logistics is offering to purchase 100% of the assets and liabilities of Winston Global. Winston looked at the paper. He looked at the price. $1. He whispered the words like they were a curse. $1. This company is worth $50 million. This company is worth negative $10 million, I corrected him. I am not buying a business. I am buying a crime scene. I am absorbing your tax fraud, your lawsuits, and your debt. That $1 is a formality to make the contract legal. It is the price of your freedom. If you sign, you walk away with no debt and no prison time. If you do not sign, Sterling leaves and the FBI enters. Winston's hands shook. But my name, he said. My legacy. Your legacy is already gone, I said. The only thing left to save is the jobs of the people who actually work here. But there are conditions. Turn to page 4. Clause 17. Immediate termination of Jamal and Trey Winston. They are barred from the premises, and they are stripped of all company shares. And Clause 18. The immediate retirement of the CEO. You are done, Dad. No consulting, no honorary title. You go to Florida and you play golf. That is the deal. Take it or leave it. He looked at the pen. He looked at the red lights pulsing like a warning. He looked at me. He realized that the daughter he had dismissed as a secretary was the only person powerful enough to save him from his own arrogance. He picked up the pen. A single tear rolled down his cheek and splashed onto the signature line. He signed his name. It was a shaky scrawl. He pushed the paper back to me. "It is yours," he whispered, closing his eyes. I picked up the contract. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I turned to Sterling. "Get the power turned back on," I said. "And call the drivers. Tell them Onyx is in charge now. We have a job to do." The ink on the contract was barely dry before I started shouting orders. The first call was to the power company. I paid the overdue bill from my personal account, and 30 seconds later, the emergency red lights flickered and died, replaced by the bright hum of fluorescent tubes. The warehouse woke up. I walked out onto the mezzanine overlooking the empty loading dock. I keyed the radio on the master frequency. "This is Brianna Winston. I am now the owner of this facility. All drivers who walked off the job this morning are invited back immediately. Overtime rates are doubled, and nobody waits for a check. You get paid cash at the end of the shift." Within an hour, the lot was full. The drivers who had abandoned my father returned for me. They knew I didn't lie. They knew I knew the routes. I called in the Onyx fleet to supplement the Winston trucks. It was a merger of iron and will. We had 48 hours to move 3,000 tons of security barriers, staging equipment, and sound systems for the governor's summit. It was impossible on paper, but we didn't drive on paper. I moved my desk to the center of the warehouse floor. I didn't want an office. I wanted to be in the fight. I directed traffic like a conductor leading a symphony of diesel engines. "You take the north gate. Mike, verify the security clearance on load 4. Sarah, call the Secret Service and tell them the perimeter fencing is 5 minutes out." We worked through the night. I didn't sleep. I drank coffee and ate an energy bar while reviewing manifests. The chaos that had paralyzed my father became a rhythm under my command. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the impossible was happening. The convoy of trucks stretched for 3 miles down the highway, moving in perfect formation. We hit the checkpoints with 0 delays, because I had pre-cleared every driver with the state police. The governor's chief of staff called me. He wasn't screaming anymore. He sounded stunned. "Miss Winston," he said, "your team is already done with the main stage. We are ahead of schedule." I have never seen a logistics operation this smooth. I watched the last truck pull away from the dock. The warehouse was empty, but my heart was full. We didn't just save the contract. We turned a potential national embarrassment into a masterclass in efficiency. The summit went off without a hitch. The champagne was cold. The stage was secure. And in the background, invisible to the cameras, the Onyx and Winston trucks sat side by side. We had turned a disaster into a victory lap. And for the first time in the history of the company, the credit didn't go to a man in a suit. It went to the team in the trucks. The chandeliers of the State House were blazing, reflecting off the crystal glasses of 500 diplomats and industry leaders. The air smelled of expensive perfume and relief. The governor's summit was not just a meeting, it was a triumph. Every barrier was in place, every microphone worked, and every security checkpoint was seamless. It was a logistical masterpiece. I stood near the side of the stage wearing a simple black suit holding a glass of water. I was tired. My feet ached from 48 hours of running a warehouse floor. But I had never felt more awake. Governor Mitchell tapped the microphone. The room went silent. He looked out at the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice resonant and warm. Tonight we celebrate unity. But I must be honest with you. 48 hours ago, this event was on the brink of cancellation. We faced a logistical crisis that threatened to embarrass this administration. But one company stepped in. One leader took charge. She didn't offer excuses. She offered results. He turned toward me. The spotlight swung across the stage, blinding me for a second before settling on my face. I would like to invite Ms. Brianna Winston up here, the new CEO of the combined Onyx and Winston Logistics Group. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite clapping. It was genuine respect. I walked up the stairs. I shook the governor's hand. I looked out at the sea of faces. These were the people my father had spent 30 years trying to impress with yachts and champagne. I had impressed them with trucks and pallets. "Thank you, Governor," I said, leaning into the mic. "But I am just the dispatcher. The real heroes are the 300 drivers and warehouse staff who haven't slept in 2 days to make sure you all had a chair to sit on tonight. This victory belongs to them." The crowd cheered again. High above on the darkened mezzanine level, an old man stood alone. Winston watched the scene below. He saw the standing ovation. He saw the way the governor looked at his daughter with genuine admiration, not just tolerance. He looked at the logo projected on the screen behind her. It wasn't just Winston Global anymore. It was Onyx. He took a sip of his drink. It was bitter. For years he had told himself that he was the sun and everyone else just orbited him. He realized now that he was just a dying star, and she was the dawn. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't jealousy, it was peace. The burden was gone, the lies were over. He set his glass down on the railing. He didn't wait for the speech to end. He turned around and walked into the shadows, leaving the light where it belonged. On her. The neon sign above the lot flickered with a buzzing sound that was giving Jamal a migraine. It read, "Big Al's Discount Auto," but to Jamal, it looked like the gates of purgatory. He stood on the cracked asphalt, wearing a polyester yellow blazer that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and despair. The hand-tailored Italian suits were gone, sold to a consignment shop to pay his divorce lawyer. He was trying to sell a 10-year-old minivan to a skeptical mother of 3 who was looking at him like he was a stain on the pavement. "Look, lady, this is a steal," Jamal said, flashing his teeth. "Low mileage, great suspension. It drives like a dream." The woman kicked the tire. The hubcap fell off and clattered onto the ground, spinning noisily before coming to a sad stop at Jamal's feet. She looked at the hubcap. She looked at Jamal. "You used to run a logistics company," she asked. "I saw you on the news. You are the guy who bankrupted his daddy." Jamal felt the heat rise in his cheeks. "That was a misunderstanding," he mumbled, picking up the plastic disc. "I think I will pass," the woman said, grabbing her purse. "If you cannot run a company, I definitely do not trust you to sell me a car." She walked away, leaving Jamal alone in the humidity. His boss, Big Al, leaned out of the trailer office. "Hey, Winston," Al shouted. "If you do not move a unit by 5 o'clock, do not bother coming back tomorrow." Jamal looked at his hands. They were covered in grease from checking the oil. He thought about the corner office. He thought about the view. Now his view was a highway overpass, and a future that looked as empty as his bank account. Miles away in the unfinished basement of his parents' rental home, Trey set up his studio. It consisted of a cardboard box and a cheap ring light he had bought at a dollar store. He smoothed his hair back, trying to look like the marketing genius he still believed he was. He hit the Go Live button on his phone. "Hey guys, it is Trey coming at you live," he said, forcing a smile. "Just wanted to update you on the legal battle against my sister, the tyrant. We are building a case to reclaim the company, but we need your support. If everyone watching sends just $10 to the link in my bio, we can hire a new legal team." He watched the viewer count. 7 people. 3 of them were bots. One comment popped up. It was from Ashley, his ex-wife. "Get a job, Trey," the comment read. "And sign the divorce papers. Stop embarrassing yourself." Trey stared at the screen. Another comment appeared. "Didn't you try to sell a plantation ad?" Another one. "Loser." Trey's smile faltered. He looked around the damp basement. There was no yacht. There was no champagne. There was just a sleeping bag in the corner and a bag of generic potato chips. He wasn't an influencer. He was a cautionary tale. He ended the stream and sat in the dark. For the first time, he realized that the internet didn't hate him. It was worse. The internet was laughing at him, and the silence that followed was the loudest sound he had ever heard. The one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs smelled of boiled cabbage and old carpet. It was a far cry from the marble floors and fresh orchids of the estate, but it was all they could afford on a state pension. Winston sat in his recliner, the leather cracked and fading, staring at the television. The volume was low, but the walls were paper-thin and he could hear the neighbors arguing about groceries. In the kitchenette, Loretta was slamming cupboard doors. She was not adjusting well to the downsizing. She treated every broken plate and leaking faucet as a personal insult directed at her by the universe. "I cannot believe we are living like rats," Loretta snapped, wiping the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "Look at this view, Winston. A brick wall. We used to look at the lake. And the dishwasher is broken again. I called the landlord 3 times. He treats me like I am nobody." "Do you hear me, Winston? Nobody." "I hear you." Loretta Winston said, his voice tired and flat. "I hear you fine." "It is that girl," Loretta hissed, throwing the rag into the sink. "Brianna. She did this to us. She stole everything. She turned our sons into beggars and she put us in this hole. I hope she is happy. I hope she rots in that big office." Winston turned his head slowly. He looked at his wife. For 40 years, he had listened to her. He had listened when she told him to go easy on the boys. He had listened when she told him Brianna was too hard, too cold, too ambitious for a woman. He had listened, and it had cost him his life work. "She did not put us here," Loretta Winston said quietly. "We put ourselves here. We raised 2 sons who are useless. We gave them everything and taught them nothing. And we ignored the one child who actually had the spine to carry the family name. Brianna is not the villain. She is the only reason I am not in a federal prison cell right now. She bought my freedom." Loretta scoffed, turning her back on him. "You are defending her. After she humiliated us. You are getting soft in your old age." "I am not getting soft," Winston said, looking back at the flickering TV screen. "I am just finally waking up. But the tragedy is, Loretta, I woke up 10 years too late." He closed his eyes. He could picture Brianna standing on that stage, the light reflecting off her face. She looked like a queen. And here he was, the king of a one-bedroom kingdom, ruling over nothing but regret and the sound of a dripping faucet. He realized then that the poverty wasn't the lack of money. It was the lack of respect. And he had spent his last coin a long time ago. I sat in the office that used to smell of expensive cigars and arrogance. Now it smelled of fresh coffee and productivity. The heavy velvet curtains were gone, replaced by sheer blinds that let the Chicago sun flood the room. I had removed the putting green. I had removed the wet bar. The massive mahogany desk where my father used to play solitaire while the business burned was now covered in shipping manifests and growth charts. It was finally a place of business. My private phone buzzed against the glass surface. I looked at the caller ID. It was a number I used to fear. Now it was just a number. I let it vibrate 3 times before picking up. I did not stop typing on my laptop. "Hello, Winston." "Oh, Brianna." His voice sounded tinny and small on the other end. "I hate to bother you at work, but things are tight this month. The state pension check is late. Your mother needs her blood pressure medication. And the rent on this apartment is higher than we expected. I was wondering if you could authorize a small transfer. Just a few thousand. We could call it a consulting fee. For old time's sake." I stopped typing. I leaned back in the leather chair, spinning slightly to look at the skyline. The city looked different from the top. It looked clearer. "Dad, we discussed this during the acquisition," I said, my voice calm and professional. "The agreement was final. You received full debt relief and immunity from prosecution. There are no consulting fees. There are no stipends. That is not how Onyx operates. We do not pay for services that are not rendered. That was the old Winston Global way, and that business model is bankrupt." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint sound of a game show on a television in the background. "So that is it," he whispered. "You are just going to let us starve. After everything I built, after everything I gave you, you are going to let your father beg." I sat forward. I was not angry. I was not vindictive. I was simply efficient. "I am not letting you starve, Dad," I said. "I believe in opportunity. In fact, Sarah just told me that our night shift security guard quit this morning. It is an entry-level position at the front gate. Minimum wage plus dental benefits. You have experience watching the building. You know the layout better than anyone. If you need money, the application link is on the company website." "Brianna." His voice cracked with disbelief. "You cannot be serious. I used to own that building. I was the CEO. We are an equal opportunity employer, Winston." I said, my hand hovering over the end call button. "We hire based on merit, not name. If you want the job, fill out the form. We treat our security staff very fairly. Good luck." I tapped the screen, ending the call. The line went dead. I looked at the black screen for a second. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I picked up my pen and turned back to the ledger. I had a company to run. This story stands as a powerful testament that competence is the ultimate leverage, and loyalty should never be confused with a lack of options. Winston's empire crumbled not because of external market forces, but because he valued image over integrity and gender over genius. He learned too late that the person holding the keys is the one who truly owns the house. The most vital takeaway is that you should never bankrupt your own self-worth to subsidize someone else's delusion. If your seat at the table isn't respected, it is time to build your own table and let them eat on the floor. Hit that subscribe button if you are done being the invisible engine and are ready to become the CEO of your own life, and let me know in the comments. What is the one thing your boss would panic about if you quit tomorrow?